A very warm welcome to another vlog, and this time around it's all about photographing large flocks of birds that tend to congregate in winter. On this windy grey day, the geese and the swans and the duck and the waders are constantly being disturbed just by the wind and by fear. And there's a good amount of movement here, and I'm managing to capture some nice video of the birds in flight. Just the sheer numbers and the excitement, it's the thrill of those birds in flight, and that's what this video is all about. Recent advances in camera and lens technology has spurred on wildlife photographers to capture astounding images of birds, simple portrait images that fill the frame. And these portrait images are very suited to viewing on social media sites such as Instagram. Now, those advances in camera technology, megapixel count apart, and that gives us the option to crop in to create those portraits. But we've also have unbelievable ISO handling, autofocus, and some of the prime lenses now come with 1.4 teleconverters built in, so at the flick of a switch you can increase your magnification. And therefore it's tempting as a wildlife photographer to go after those portrait images that fit so well on a mobile phone screen within Instagram or other social media posts. But as I've mentioned, this video is about taking a step back and looking at how the birds interact, the flights of these birds. And it is a thrilling sight to see large numbers of geese and waders. I'm distracted again as I can see another large flock of geese have come in to land here. Well, back in the day when we were much closer to nature, we created collective terms for these flights of waders and wildfowl that we tend to call flocks now. And you only have to listen to those words that were used. You know, a skein of geese, a herd of curlew, an omniscience of godwits, an inspiration of waders. And I think that says it all. For this type, this subgenre of bird photography is much more accessible to all. And it's not the reserve of wildlife photographers who have, you know, the long prime lenses, who capture those beautiful portrait images of birds. So on to the next location. Well, we've travelled from the sloblands of Wexford to another destination to see what is probably the most well-known congregation of wintering birds, and that's the Murmuration of Starlings. I'm here at Loch Ennell. It's close to sunset, and we're awaiting the birds to gather over the far side of the lake. Now, if we dwell on the collective term for birds in flight, we have those inspirations of waders, and the Murmuration of Starlings gets its name from the sound, that murmur, as the starlings fly over one's head. In winter, starlings move from their feeding area usually to a safe location where they gather in huge numbers for two reasons. Number one, for safety, as birds of prey target the birds as they concentrate together, and herding, just as wildebeest herd in Africa protects against predation. The second reason it is thought that they gather for warmth on cold nights. Now, what's particularly unusual about murmurations of starlings are the incredible shapes that these tightly knit flocks of birds create in the evening sky. And scientists have studied those formations and those shapes. And there is an exact number which underpins the shapes that they take. Each starling must be aware of 7 starlings around it and directs its flight based on those 7 starlings. Now, apart from the congregating starlings, those murmurations, starlings themselves are one of the most intelligent birds, and they have an incredible capacity to mimic any sound. I have recently seen a video of a woman appearing to speak to a starling. The starling was repeating exactly what she was saying, so they can mimic the human voice. So if you're out and about, standing beside the lake, and you hear what you think may be somebody talking to themselves, look up. It could be a starling on a branch. Mozart kept a pet starling for 3 years and was very fond of it. There is a story, and it's written and recorded, that either Mozart learned the motif from his opening movement of the 17th piano concerto from a starling, or else he taught that starling the motif. But nonetheless, he ensured that when the starling passed, there was a formal funeral for the starling. So let's turn around, watch the skies, and let's see if we can take a photograph and some video of the murmuration here in Loch Ennell. Well, the show is over, and the starlings certainly did put on a show this evening. Not quite in front of us here, so the position I've picked by the side of the lake wasn't to their liking this evening. Maybe if I had moved a few hundred meters down the shore of the lake, that might have, resulted in better video. But this really isn't about videos or photographs. It's about experiencing that sound as it rushes over your head, and as different groups of starlings congregate to form a bigger and a bigger and a bigger centre. And the swirling of the starlings over the far side of the lake you hear just to over here. That's where the action was happening. I was shooting with the 24-120 at 120. I did switch to the 100-400mm lens, and as the light decreased, as you would expect, the ISO went through the roof, up there around 20,000 at one stage. So let's leave Loch Ennell now, and we'll return to the Sloblands of Wexford and seek out other large congregations of wintering birds. We're back here at the Wexford Wildfowl Refuge to further explore photographing large flocks of wintering birds. So let's talk briefly about the approach to photographing large flocks of birds. The first question is where to find them. And if you Google online, you'll find many resources, particularly with regards to large estuaries. And that's where the wintering waders and wildfowl gather in winter. Here at Wexford Harbour, you couldn't pick a better place in the whole of Ireland for numbers of birds. In Dublin, the Bull Island is a prime location as the birds have grown accustomed to people. So getting close to the birds is much easier there. The second consideration is when to photograph the birds. High tide is ideal. As the birds huddle together, they roost and gather in large numbers. At certain points, here at Wexford Harbour, there are certain points where they gather. One of them is on the North Slob, and there are several other places around the coast here. And if we can get a high tide early in the morning or late in the afternoon, we have the gathering of birds and we have quality light. And I'm lucky enough, we have a high tide here. It's about half an hour after sunrise. So the third consideration is the in-camera settings and how do we best manage that when taking photographs of large flocks of birds. So I'm going to cover two approaches to photographing birds. The first is to introduce a little bit of blur to reduce the shutter speed and to convey to the viewer a sense of movement. So that maybe we have the wings slightly blurred and the head sharp. Alternatively, what we can do is reduce the shutter speed again and create a total blur, a real abstract image to convey that sense of movement. We can also employ a panning technique where we pan the camera around in the direction the bird is moving so that the background is totally blurred and the bird has some blur, but there's a sense of movement there. Now, if we want to get sharp images, what we need to consider is focusing on the bird that's closest to us within the flock. If the birds are flying towards us, we want to focus on the bird in front of the flock. And it really is as simple as that. So I'm going to pack up here and make my way to the observation tower, and hopefully we'll get a few birds in flight. So I've stopped briefly on the Greenroads here in the Slobs and in the stubble fields. Quite distant are a large enough spread out flock of Greenland white-fronted geese. So a different approach, and as you'll see behind me, I'm using the van as a blind as such and just standing out to the side of it. Wild geese, and particularly grey geese such as Greenland white-fronted, are easily spooked. So I'm very aware of my presence in their habitat here. So I do not want them to fly. They're busy feeding, fattening up for the trip back up to the Arctic Circle in a few months' time. So restricted as I am to getting any closer or wanting to get any closer, I have the 1.4 converter on, close down the aperture to about f8 or f9, and I'm trying to take 1 or 2 shots to try to get the stubble field in focus and also the geese. But this is very much a landscape image with geese within. Well, as the tide recedes, the wading birds venture out onto the mudflats to feed. And I've come now to the southern shore of Wexford Harbour here at Rosslare Backstrand. And it's a really super place to see large numbers, particularly of the smaller waders, such as Dunlin, as they form tight flocks, and they keep the tight flocks that they had when they were roosting out on the mudflats. And from time to time, they may be disturbed by a bird of prey or take flight, and they form tightly knit congregations of birds in flight. Very fast they are too. And so another vlog has come to an end, and I truly hope you've enjoyed this exploration of photographing and videoing these large flocks or congregations or murmurations or inspirations of birds. Until next time, thank you so much for watching.